Naruto has had a lot of iconic fights. There's Haku versus Team 7, there's Might Guy versus Madara, there's Pain Nut. I could go on. Some of the best animated fights that I personally have ever seen, but which one is honestly the best? And there's a lot to go through. Honestly, there's a lot to go through. So I compiled a list of about the top 20 that I've seen from different websites to really like pick from. I feel like, because I feel like if we looked at every single fight, it would just be too long. You know what I'm saying? I feel like it would just take way too long. So I'm going to look at the ones that I feel like could potentially be the best fight in Naruto. All of this is my opinion. And yeah, I'm just going to hop right into it. So when it comes to fights and how I sort of rank them and how I judge them, I kind of look at a couple things. I look at just how good the animation was, right? Because obviously in terms of animation in a fight, it's very, very important, and how fluid it is. I look at the characters fighting. I take note of who's fighting, if I like the characters, what they're doing, you know what I'm saying, and how much weight their fight holds onto the plot of the story. I feel like that's sort of how I judge a fight, and how important it is and how good it is. That's really how I dissect them. So off the bat, I kind of want to talk about Naruto and Sasuke and Kakashi and Sakura versus Kaguya, because I feel like that was a good fight, but I definitely don't feel like it's anywhere close to the best fight in Naruto, while it may be the last fight in Naruto. So I just wanted to get that one off the bat. Again, this video is all my opinion, so I'm just going to kind of breeze and explain the fights that I feel like are good fights, but that I feel like aren't anywhere close to the best fight. And okay, so next, I feel like Madara versus the 5 Kage was also a very, very, very good fight, and had a lot of great story elements, and it was just overall a absolute masterpiece of a fight, I feel like, but it definitely wasn't the best, because I feel like in terms of Naruto, there is not going to be a group versus, like, a group fight. I feel like it can't be the best fight. Like, it has to be a one-on-one fight in this show for me to feel like it's the best fight, if that makes sense. Like, I don't feel like any of these like team versus one person or two people fights are going to be at the top of my list. Or I mean at the top because I'm not making a list, but at the top because I feel like one-on-one fights hold more weight to them. A couple of notable Akatsuki fights, I mean, there's Sasuke versus Deidara, also a very good fight, and could arguably be like a top 5 fight for me. Honestly, I think that fight was very good, and I really like Deidara as a character. I also really like Sasuke as a character, and just watching them go at it, it was very fun for me to watch, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Also, Sasori versus Chiyo and Sakura, such a good fight, man. I feel like Sasori is definitely one of my favorite Akatsuki members, and I don't know, like when I watched that fight, it was just, there was like, it had a more dark feel to it. I feel like it was just all the puppets and stuff, and Sasori's backstory. They really did a good job of storytelling. Overall, just a very good fight for Sasori versus Sakura and Chiyo. I feel like Sakura also doesn't get enough credit in that fight, but I'm not talking about that here. Also with the Sound 5, all those fights were really good as well. Neji versus the Spider Dude, and then Choji versus the orange-haired guy, I forgot his name, Juzo, or whatever his name was. I don't even remember what his name was. But yeah, all those fights were good, but I don't think they significantly impacted the story overall. At the time, yes, but I feel like none of those really could be a top fight, because obviously, while they were main villains, they weren't main villains, and they weren't main characters, all of those villains. Like, they were, but they weren't. They were like underlings of Orochimaru, and I feel like none of those fights really held weight like that and made you feel a certain way, right? Another great fight, another really, really good fight, Sasuke versus Danzo. I'm not going to talk about this one yet, because I feel like Sasuke versus Danzo is definitely a potential best Naruto fight for me. Like, the potential best Naruto fight for me, because it's such a good fight, man. But on to the next one, Itachi and Sasuke versus Kabuto. I mean, this was a really good fight, and honestly, I'm not really a fan of Kabuto as a character, but watching Sasuke and Itachi go at him was very great to watch, and watching Sasuke get that closure with Itachi was also extremely, like, I don't know, man. That shit was sexy. I'm not gonna lie to you. That made me happy. It made me smile. Like, it was really good. It was a really good fight. Would that be the best Naruto fight for me? No, I don't feel like. And I don't know. I feel like everyone's going to have different opinions on their best Naruto fight. What is the best fight in Naruto? And right now, I'm kind of just trying to like narrow it down. Minato versus Obito? No. I'm looking at a list right now, by the way. Shikamaru versus Hidan. Wow, that was a great fight and was a held a lot of weight to the story. Yeah, no, I just rewatched the fight and I just keep forgetting that this is the best Naruto fight that I'm looking for right now. And Shikamaru versus Hidan, while it is a great fight, it is not the best Naruto fight. The best Naruto fight, we have to look at impact, we have to look at animation, we have to look at, like, there's so many things we have to look at, or I have to look at, right? Kakashi versus Obito, I don't know if I mentioned that already. While it is a great fight, it cannot be the best fight, I feel like. After narrowing all of those down, I feel like we are kind of stuck with Naruto versus Pain, Sasuke versus Naruto, either part 1 or part 2, Sasuke versus Itachi, Guy versus Madara, Rockley versus Gara, and I feel like maybe Sasuke versus Danzo. I feel like for me personally, those 6 or 7 that I just named are definitely my favorite fights in the whole show. Now, what would I say is my favorite fight out of those 7? Let's just look at all of them individually and try to narrow it down, right? Because there are also a lot of fights that I didn't even mention that may be someone else's favorite fight, but I'm looking at the fights that are very notable to me and that I feel like are the most important and the most impactful in the story and that I enjoyed the most. There's also Naruto versus Gara, which is, with at the time when it was airing, was a great fight. Held a lot of weight in the story, and I might have to also put that in my top list that I have right now, because that was a really good fight. And I feel like Naruto fighting Gara, that fight is what changed Gara completely. So I mean, that was a very important fight. Also, Jiraiya versus Pain, a great fight. Do I think Naruto versus Pain is better though? I honestly do, and that's the only reason why I don't have Jiraiya versus Pain up there, because I feel like Naruto versus Pain was better. So I'm looking at my fights right now. I'm just going to start with Guy versus Madara. Okay, Guy versus Madara, let me tell you, if we're looking at just purely hype, I feel like Guy versus Madara definitely takes the cake for me. I feel like Guy going into that 8th gate, man, it was definitely the best, because you looking at Guy, you wouldn't expect him to be able to even like box with Madara like that. You know what I'm saying? And watching him completely beat the shit out of him for that whole episode or however long it was absolutely fucking mental. It was like the craziest thing to me. Like, just watching him go crazy, I didn't even think that shit was possible. But he was going nuts. And he put like, when I watched that fight, I genuinely thought he was going to like beat him in some way. Even though I knew, because obviously Naruto and Sasuke are the main characters of the show, like they would actually have to end up defeating Madara in some way. When Guy fought Madara, it just seemed like he could beat him. Like, it seemed like, unless some bullshit happened, which in a sense it did, but I mean, it's whatever. But it seemed like Guy actually could have beaten Madara. And then seeing Madara acknowledge him too, it really was very great for me to watch animation-wise. I forgot to also mention Thorough Kage versus Orochimaru, very good. Neji versus Naruto, very good. All the Chunin exam fights, very good. But I feel like Rockley versus Gar was the best Chunin exam fight. That's the reason why I have it up here right now. But honestly, I might have to add Third Hokage versus Orochimaru onto my final sort of cross-out section, because that fight was not only so impactful to the story, but it was just so, like, intense. Naruto versus Sasuke, part 1. I'm going to talk about part 1 right now. Part 1, obviously, that was the build-up. Everyone wanted them to fight eventually, and we eventually got it. I think it was the last episode of Naruto before Shippuden, or however many before Shippuden, right? Great fight. I mean, I feel like they delivered with it. For me, I feel like Naruto versus Sasuke was so, like, definitely going to happen that I already expected that greatness, that for me, it couldn't be my best Naruto fight, because I expected it to be that good. If that makes any sort of sense at all. Like, I expected it to be a very good fight, because they're obviously rivals. You know, you're watching the show, typical anime. They're rivals. They're going to fight, and they're going to have some sort of, like, big brawl eventually. It was everything I could have asked for, part 1 and part 2. Everything I could have asked for in a fight. I just don't feel like, at least part 1 for me could be my top Naruto fight. I feel like part 2 definitely has potential, but I mean, at part 1, you kind of expected that. But seeing Sasuke win, that was kind of a shocker for me. But I mean, other than that, the fight delivered, and yeah, I don't feel like it could be in my top, because I expected it to be that good, if that makes any sort of sense at all. But I'm moving on to the next one. Pain versus Naruto. This fight, definitely a contender for the top, because, I mean, Naruto's entrance, like, if we're talking about Naruto and Sasuke buildup, the Akatsuki buildup for him to finally just beat the shit out of the leader of the Akatsuki finally after he killed his whole village damn near. I mean, you can't get better than that. And the animation for this fight was crisp, and not the whole build up to it with Kakashi. You thought Kakashi was dead, right? You thought Kakashi was dead as hell. And I was like, wow, this is gonna be like a good fight. And then when he was like going crazy because Pain was doing something to Hinata. I don't remember if he was like sticking the poles in there. I don't remember what he was doing. Yeah, so I just rewatched that fight, right? Animation's crisp, and I know a lot of people hate on like that one scene specifically where Pain looks like he's a piece of jello, right? But the fluidity of that animation I feel like is very underappreciated. And while they did a lot of it, like they made it very over exaggerated, I feel like it really helped the fight, in my opinion. But I feel like that's the first time he really like changed the enemy and was like, yo, listen, like, you gotta be good, man. Like, made them change their ways. Like, but on a significantly greater scale. Obviously, Nagato then revived everyone. Definitely, I'm gonna move that to number 1 right now. After explaining all that, I feel like that definitely, if I don't see it with any of these other fights, that's my favorite Naruto fight of all time. Right? So next I'm gonna be talking about Sasuke versus Itachi. I mean, this is a fight that I really want. Like, I wanted this honestly more than Naruto and Sasuke. Personally, Sasuke versus Itachi, I wanted a lot more than Naruto versus Sasuke. And I feel like this fight, I see a lot of people say that this fight didn't deliver. I feel like this fight delivered more than it should have. I feel like this fight was absolutely great. I don't like the fact that Itachi was sick, but I mean, that's just what his character is. I feel like that's definitely the problem with me for this fight, right? I know he was sick, and I know he was sick throughout the show, but I feel like if there was a fully healthy Itachi versus a fully healthy Sasuke, that fight would have been better. And I feel like that might be why it's not my favorite fight. Because I feel like just the fact that I know he was somewhat at a disadvantage, that you could say he's at a disadvantage, that like lowers the scale of the fight for me. While it is a top 3 for me, definitely. I definitely don't see it being my number 1 only for that. Like, I unconsciously am like, damn, he was kind of at a disadvantage. Because didn't Itachi kind of let him win? Like, didn't Itachi purposely stay alive to fight Sasuke and have Sasuke kind of like, dude, unless I'm tripping, right? So I feel like if they both had the intent to kill or the intent to fight their hardest, I feel like it would definitely be the best fight. But obviously there are some factors such as him not being well and him possibly letting him win. I don't know. But I feel like that just sits in the back of my mind, and that's not going to let it be the top fight for me personally. But it may be other people's top fights. I don't know. Okay, so third Hokage versus Orochimaru. I'm going to talk about it right now really quick. I feel like this fight definitely so much... Like, this was the third Hokage could have ended the show, basically, or made the show a lot shorter. And I feel like that is that shows how big this, like, fight was. If the third Hokage were to hypothetically win that fight, the show would have been cut in half. There would have just been the Akatsuki they had to deal with, because Orochimaru then wouldn't have taken Sasuke, and it would have been this whole... So you know what I'm saying? Like, it would have been a completely different show, and I feel like that just shows how big of a fight it was. I know I just said that, but the third Hokage dying and fighting, like, as a kid, because he's the only Hokage that you know at that point in the show, maybe other than them mentioning Naruto's dad in the first and the second. But like watching the first and the second Hokage fight with him and the third Hokage keeping up and all that, and Orochimaru just completely going mad. And like, I feel like in terms of story, this is the best fight for me personally. In terms of the story and how it affected the story and what it did to the story at the time, I feel like this is definitely my favorite fight. But I feel like there are fights that are more hyped and more and animated better. Obviously, because this fight was animated back in the day. But there are fights that I enjoyed more visually than this fight. But I feel like this fight is very underappreciated and kind of forgotten about a little bit. I damn near forgot about it in this video. Looking at it just now and thinking about it, I don't feel like it's the best fight in Naruto, but I feel like it is a top 5, man. It is a really good fight. On to my last one that I'm going to be talking about that I feel like could possibly be a top for me. The top fight is Rockley versus Gar. Now, in terms of story at the time, this significantly impacted the story just because this showed how much of a menace to society Gara was. It showed that he was a cold-blooded killer and that he would do like he doesn't care. It was showing like that he's a threat that needs to be handled, because at the time when you're watching the show, you genuinely think Gara is unstoppable. Like, there is nothing that could Rockley was the first person that you see in that show be able to touch Gara, because none of the other ninja were doing it. None of the other ninja were fast enough to do something like that. And like, that's where it was like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, why is he that fast? He doesn't even have like ninjutsu and chakra like that. Like, what the fuck's happening? Yeah, but this fight is definitely a very iconic fight. I feel like it's the fight that everyone talks about the most. And if we're talking about pure just like visual fighting and hype, I feel like this could possibly be the best, honestly. But would I take Madara versus Might Guy over this fight? I might. Guy. Don't. Okay. Would I take Might Guy versus Madara over Rockley and Gara? Because whatever I take here is going up against Naruto versus Pain, basically. I think I would have to take Guy versus Madara. And I'm only taking Guy versus Madara because it's kind of a similar situation, if you think about it. Because Gara seemed untouched, Madara seemed untouched, right? They both seemed very untouched. And then Rockley, was that on purpose? Did they actually do that on purpose? Because Rockley unleashed a power that no one has seen before. That was a high risk, high reward maneuver that could easily get him injured, but could send his opponent away. Guy did the same thing with Madara. I genuinely thought that Guy was not going to be revived, because when they said the whole show, all however many episodes of the show, when you open the 8th gate, you are done. Like that's your last life force. You know what I'm saying? You're done. So when he opened that 8th gate, I feel like he was done for. Like, I thought he was done. Then Naruto pulls up and then reses him. So I was like, okay, whatever. Like, I guess that's cool. But I feel like honestly, while obviously I want Guy alive, I feel like if he ended his like legacy in that fight, that it would be better. Honestly, I feel like Naruto reviving him, while obviously I want him to be alive, I feel like the fight would have held more weight if he actually died in that fight. Because if they could kill Neji off, how they killed off Neji, then they could kill off Might Guy with him beating the fuck out of Madara. You know what I'm saying? That's how I feel, at least. So I feel like I'm going to take Guy versus Madara over Lee versus Gara, because I feel like Guy versus Madara is just a better Lee versus Gara to me. But now if I'm comparing Madara and Guy to Naruto and Pain, I feel like it goes without saying that while I feel like the animation and the pure adrenaline that Guy versus Madara was pumping into my veins, I feel like Naruto versus Pain held more weight to the story, was still very hyped. No, I don't know. I feel like, no, honestly, Guy versus Madara, I'm going to say it right now, Guy versus Madara would be my best fight if Guy wasn't revived at the end of that fight. And that's only because I feel like if he like actually were to be gone after he finished up, I feel like it would have held more weight for me. Yeah, I'm going to take Naruto and Pain. I'm going to take Naruto versus Pain as my personal favorite Naruto fight because, as I said, Guy versus Madara was a pure adrenaline rush. It was absolutely insane. Honestly, it was so good to watch. But I feel like Naruto versus Pain is a more complete fight and is the most complete fight in all of Naruto due to the fact that it was just years of build-up, right? Years of build-up for finally to beat the Akatsuki. Oh shit. I didn't even talk about Naruto and Sasuke part 2. I'm still taking Naruto versus Pain over that fight though. But yeah, as I was saying, Naruto versus Pain is just the most complete fight in my opinion. And yeah, that's really how I feel about it. Honestly, that's it. I like this type of video. Personally, I really like this type of video. But yeah, say what your favorite fight is, and then also let me know what other like types of videos like the best character in this show or something like that. You know? Yeah, and that's really it.